The sand gave way beneath Riley Harper's boots like it was trying to swallow her whole. Each step a reminder that the ground here didn't shift like the desert had. She dropped to her knees beside the old oak tree, its roots twisting into the earth like veins exposed after too many storms, and there it was, the faded metal box half buried, rusted from years of salt air and neglect. Her fingers trembled as she pried it open, the hinge screeching like a distant memory she couldn't outrun, and the first letter spilled out, ink blurred but words still sharp. Riley, if you're reading this, promise me you'll come back whole. Not just your body. Your heart. That was part one, the wound reopening under the relentless Carolina sun, because Riley hadn't come back whole. Not even close. The war in the dust-choked valleys of Afghanistan had carved pieces from her she couldn't name, left her with nights where the hum of cicadas twisted into the whine of incoming rounds, and days where the simplest touch, a stranger's hand on her arm at the grocery store, sent her flinching into shadows. She was 32 now, a ghost in her own skin, discharged with a metal pin to her chest and a duffel bag of regrets slung over her shoulder. North Carolina welcomed her back with open arms and closed minds. The clap on the back from old high school buddies at the VFW hall, the pitying nods from neighbors who whispered about that poor Harper girl, as if she were still the tomboy who climbed pines and dreamed of escaping to the city lights of Portland or the misty peaks of Montana. But Riley stayed. Where else was there? Her parents' farmhouse sat squat and stubborn on the outskirts of Wilmington, its white clapboard peeling like old promises, the porch swing creaking empty since her father passed from the cancer that ate him slow, and her mother retreated into the garden, tending azaleas as if they could bloom away the silence. Riley moved into the attic room, the one with the slanted ceiling that pressed down like guilt, and spent her mornings running the beach until her lungs burned, afternoons staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin, evenings nursing a beer on the dock while the marsh whispered secrets she no longer trusted. The letters were her anchor out there in the war. Evie Monroe's handwriting, all looping grace and hurried edges, had arrived like contraband in the chaos of forward operating bases, slips of paper folded into her vest, read by the dim glow of a headlamp while the world outside thrummed with threat. Evie, with her golden hair and eyes like polished oak, the girl who'd been Riley's first everything back in their senior year at the community college in Raleigh. They'd met in a literature class, Riley the rough-edged athlete fresh from the soccer fields, Evie the soft-spoken art major from a family of teachers up in Vermont, visiting kin for the summer. What started as shared cigarettes behind the bleachers bloomed into stolen nights in Evie's borrowed Chevy, parked under star-pricked skies, hands exploring with the tentative fire of youth discovering itself. But love in a small town was a fragile thing, especially when one half dreamed of duty and the other of canvas and quiet. Riley enlisted at 22, the pull of service a siren call she couldn't ignore, her mother's pride masking the fear in her father's eyes. Evie begged her to stay, tears carving tracks down her freckled cheeks, but Riley went anyway, leaving behind a promise ring on a chain around her neck and a stack of unsent postcards. The letters began then, Evie's words a lifeline across oceans. Stories of the autumn leaves turning in Burlington, sketches of loons on the lake, confessions of how the bed felt too vast without her. "You're my compass, Riley," she'd written once. "Even when the storms blind you." Riley read them now, cross-legged on the attic floor amid dust motes dancing in the afternoon light slanting through the gable window. The box held dozens, bundled with twine that smelled faintly of lavender, Evie's scent, the one that used to cling to Riley's collar after their embraces. She unfolded them one by one, the paper crackling like dry leaves underfoot. There were the early ones buoyant with hope. "I saw a shooting star last night and wished for your safe return. Make it 2 wishes if you see one too." Then the middles shadowed by distance. "The news keeps me up. I paint to forget, but your face bleeds through every stroke." And the last sent months after Riley's injury, a stray bullet grazing her cheek in a market ambush that killed 2 of her squad, arrived like a ghost. "They told me you were hurt. God, Riley, I can't breathe without knowing you're breathing. Come home. Please." She hadn't written back. Not once. The shame of it coiled in her gut like barbed wire because what could she say? That the girl who'd once traced constellations on her back now felt like a dream too tender for the grit of her reality? That the explosion had stolen not just flesh but the capacity for softness, leaving her hollowed out, a vessel for echoes? Riley slammed the box shut, the sound echoing like a door kicked in, and stumbled down the stairs, past her mother's questioning glance from the kitchen where biscuits cooled on a wire rack. Outside, the air hung heavy with jasmine and the distant roll of waves, but it did nothing to ease the ache blooming behind her ribs. That night, sleep evaded her as it often did. The ceiling fan whirred like rotor blades, and in the dark, the letters replayed in her mind, Evie's voice a phantom whisper. Riley rose before dawn, pulled on her running shoes, and hit the trail that wound from the farmhouse through the maritime forest. Oaks draped in resurrection fern, palmettos rustling like conspirators. Her breath came in ragged bursts, feet pounding the packed earth. But the rhythm couldn't drown the questions rising like tidewater. What if she'd answered? What if Evie had moved on, found someone whose hands didn't flinch at intimacy, whose laughter didn't fracture into silence? The path spilled onto the beach at False Cape, where the dunes rose like sentinels, sea oats bending in the wind. Riley collapsed against a driftwood log, salt stinging the scar on her cheek, and pulled the promise ring from her pocket, Evie's left in the box with the final letter. It caught the first blush of sunrise, a simple silver band etched with a tiny oak leaf, symbol of the Vermont woods Evie loved. Holding it to her lips, Riley tasted metal and memory, and for the first time in months, tears came unbidden, hot and unyielding, carving paths through the sand on her skin. Back at the house, her mother waited with coffee black as midnight, eyes sharp behind her reading glasses. Clara Harper was a woman of few words, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a practical bun, hands rough from decades of tending soil and souls. "You look like hell, child," she said, sliding the mug across the scarred oak table. Riley sank into the chair, the wood groaning under her weight, and for once she didn't deflect. "It's the letters, Mama. Evie's. I found the box I buried before I left." Clara nodded, stirring her own cup slowly, the spoon clinking like a metronome to unspoken grief. "She wrote every week, you know. Mailed them here thinking I'd forward them. I did at first. Then, well, you stopped replying." Riley's throat tightened, the coffee turning bitter on her tongue. "I didn't know how. Out there it was all sand and screams." Her words, they were too clean. Like they didn't belong in my world. Her mother reached across, covering Riley's hand with her own, calluses aligning like old allies. "Worlds change, Riley. But hearts? They remember the shape of what fits." She paused, gaze drifting to the window where mockingbirds flitted through the live oaks. "Evie's still out there, last I heard. Teaching up in some little town in the mountains. Asheville, maybe. Sent a card at Christmas once after you shipped out." Riley's pulse quickened, a flutter like wings trapped in her chest. Asheville. Cradled in the Blue Ridge where mist clung to peaks like secrets, far enough from the coast to feel like another life. "You think she'd want to hear from me now? After all this time?" Clara's smile was a rare bloom, soft around the edges. "Only one way to find out. But Riley, don't go chasing ghosts. Face what's left of you first." The days blurred into a tentative rhythm after that. Riley took a job at the local boatyard, sanding hulls until her arms ached with purpose, the scrape of fiberglass a balm against the chaos in her head. Evenings she sat on the porch with a notebook, pen hovering like a hesitant bird. The words came slow at first, apologies wrapped in fragments of memory, the way Evie's laugh had tangled with the radio static on those late-night drives, the press of her palm against Riley's thigh under the dashboard glow. "I survived because of you," she wrote finally, the admission a weight lifting. "But coming home? That's the harder fight." She sealed the letter with tape from the junk drawer. No kiss or flourish, just her name in block letters on the envelope. Mailing it felt like casting a line into fog-shrouded waters, uncertain if anything would bite. But as the truck rumbled away down the oyster shell drive, Riley felt the first stir of something lighter than dread, a whisper of possibility, like sunlight piercing the canopy after rain. Weeks passed with the languid stretch of summer, humidity wrapping the air like a damp shroud. The letter hung over her like an unanswered prayer, until one muggy afternoon, as thunderheads gathered over the sound, a reply arrived. Slim envelope, postmarked Asheville. Evie's script unmistakable even through the blur of travel. Riley's hand shook as she slit it open with her pocket knife, the blade glinting like a talisman. "Riley, It began, no preamble, voice woven into the page. Your words found me on a day when the fog was thickest. I've carried you in my sketches all these years, lines of your jaw against mountain backdrops, your eyes in the curve of a river bend. I'm glad you survived. More than glad. Scared too of what comes next. But if you're willing, meet me where the ridges meet the sky. There's a cabin by the creek in Pisgah Forest. Room for two if you dare. Riley folded it into her pocket, heart hammering like artillery in the distance. The war had taught her survival in inches. Duck and cover. Assess the threat. Move when the moment breaks. But this was the uncharted terrain. The space between breaths where hope took root. She packed light. Jeans worn soft at the knees, a flannel the color of moss, the ring tucked safe. As the old Ford pickup climbed the winding roads west, leaving the flatlands for the undulating blues of the Appalachians, Riley glanced in the rearview at the fading coast, a ribbon of silver against the horizon. The wound still throbbed, raw and insistent, but for the first time it felt like a map, not a maze, leading her not away but toward. The mountain air hit Riley like a baptism, cool and pine-scented, stripping away the brine of the coast as her truck crested the final ridge into Pisgah National Forest. The road narrowed to a gravel scar winding through stands of hemlock and rhododendron, their leaves glossy under the dappled light filtering through the canopy. Asheville lay below like a hidden gem, its brick-lined streets and art-decked galleries a world apart from the straightforward salt of Wilmington. But it was the forest that called to her now, ancient and unyielding roots delving deep where her own felt adrift. The cabin Evie described squatted at the end of a rutted drive. A low-slung A-frame of weathered cedar blending into the hillside, smoke curling lazy from the stone chimney. A creek chuckled nearby, its waters clear over smoothed pebbles, and wildflowers nodded in the breeze, trillium and columbine, bursts of white and purple against the green. Riley killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying her pulse, and stepped out, boots crunching on fallen needles. She scanned the porch, shadowed by a swing hung from chains rusted to patina, and there, movement, a figure emerging from the screen door like a painting come to life. Evie Monroe hadn't changed so much as deepened, the years etching a quiet strength into her features. At 30, she carried the grace of someone who'd learned to bend without breaking. Hair the color of sun-bleached wheat falling in loose waves to her shoulders, eyes the warm brown of fertile earth, freckles dusting her nose like stars scattered careless. She wore a simple sundress, faded blue cotton that skimmed her knees, bare feet silent on the planks, a sketchpad tucked under one arm. For a moment they stood frozen, the distance between them a chasm spanned only by the letters that had bridged oceans. "Riley," Evie said, voice soft as the creek's murmur, stepping forward with a tentative smile that cracked the armor around Riley's chest. It wasn't the broad grin of their youth, all reckless joy, but something earned, edges softened by time, laced with the ache of absence. Evie. Riley's throat worked around the word, rough as gravel. She closed the gap in 3 strides, stopping just short, hands flexing at her sides as if unsure whether to reach or retreat. Up close, Evie smelled of lavender and linseed oil, the artist scent that used to linger on Riley's skin after lazy afternoons in the studio. The embrace, when it came, was hesitant, a brush of shoulders, then arms wrapping slow, Evie's cheek against Riley's collarbone, Riley's hand finding the familiar curve of her back. It lasted a breath, then 2, until the world narrowed to the rise and fall of shared lungs, the forest holding its vigil. When they parted, Evie's eyes shimmered, not with tears but with the sheen of recognition, like seeing one's reflection after years abroad. "Come inside," she said, gesturing to the door. "I've got tea steeping. And questions if you're ready." The cabin's interior wrapped them in warmth, walls lined with bookshelves groaning under tomes of poetry and field guides, windows framing views of the creek where light danced like fireflies on water. A quilt, pieced from scraps of flannel and denim, draped the sagging sofa, and on the low table, a vase of mountain laurel bloomed defiant pink. Evie poured chamomile into mugs chipped from use, handing one over with fingers that grazed Riley's. Electric, that touch, a spark jumping the gap. They settled on the porch swing, the chains creaking a lullaby as they swayed, the valley unfolding below in layers of blue and green haze. Evie spoke first, her words measured, painting the years in broad strokes. The move back to Vermont after college, teaching art to high schoolers in a mill town gone quiet, the way Riley's absence carved a hollow she filled with canvas and clay. I stopped painting people for a while, she admitted, gaze fixed on a hawk wheeling overhead. Too many ghosts in the lines. But then your letter came and it was like color bleeding back in. Riley sipped her tea, the steam curling like unspoken fears. I buried those letters before I deployed. Thought it'd make leaving easier. Like cutting a tether. She traced the mug's rim, the ceramic smooth under her thumb. But out there, when the nights got long and the days bled together, I'd pull them out. Your words, they were the only thing that felt real. Not the patrols or the briefings. You. Evie's hand found hers then, palm upturned in invitation, and Riley took it, lacing fingers like puzzle pieces slotting home. The contact grounded her, the war's echoes fading to a distant hum. They talked until the sun dipped low, shadows lengthening across the porch like fingers reaching for secrets. Evie shared sketches from her pad, landscapes of the ridges, abstract swirls that Riley recognized as the chaos of combat transposed to ink. This one's you, Evie said, flipping to a page of jagged lines resolving into a horizon, a single oak standing sentinel. Strong but weathered, beautiful in the breaking. Night fell soft, stars pricking the velvet sky, and Evie lit lanterns that cast golden pools on the wood. Dinner was simple. Cornbread from the oven, greens wilted with bacon fat, tomatoes sliced thick from the garden patch behind the cabin. They ate at the rough-hewn table, knees brushing under it, laughter bubbling up unexpected when Evie recounted a student's mishap with clay that turned the classroom into a slip-and-slide. For Riley it was a revelation. Joy without the undercurrent of dread. A meal shared without scanning for exits. But the fracture lines ran deep, surfacing when talk turned to the war. Riley set her fork down, the clink loud in the hush. It changed me, Evie. The things I saw. The things I did. Her voice cracked, eyes dropping to the grain of the wood, tracing knots like scars. I wake up tasting sand sometimes, hearing screams that aren't there. Evie leaned forward, elbows on the table, her gaze a steady anchor. Then tell me. Let me carry some of it. That's what the letters were for, wasn't it? Not just to keep you going, but to remind you there's a place to land. The words unlocked something, a floodgate creaking open. Riley spoke haltingly at first, the ambush in the bazaar, dust choking the air as bullets whined, the weight of her rifle too heavy for the girl who'd once cradled Evie's face in moonlight. Then the injury, the medevac chopper's thump-thump pulling her from the fray, the hospital smells of antiseptic and regret. Evie listened without interruption, her hand steady on Riley's arm, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks when Riley described the letters as her shield, read until the paper wore thin. When the story ebbed, Evie rose, pulling Riley to her feet and leading her to the door. Outside, the creek sang under the moon, full and silver, illuminating the path to a hammock strung between two poplars. They climbed in together, bodies fitting side by side, the weave cradling them like a promise. Evie's head on Riley's shoulder, Riley's arm around her waist, the night air cool on fevered skin. You're here now, Evie murmured, breath warm against Riley's neck. That's the victory. Sleep came fitful, dreams weaving desert mirages with mountain streams. But when Riley woke to birdsong threading the leaves, Evie's fingers were still entwined with hers, a tether unbroken. Breakfast was oatmeal simmered with wild berries, eaten on the porch as mist burned off the valley, revealing peaks like the spine of some ancient beast. They hiked that morning, following the creek upstream through fern-choked gullies, Evie's hand slipping into Riley's at every ford, steadying her over slick stones. At a clearing by a cascade, Evie spread a blanket, unpacking cheese and apples from a knapsack, but it was the sketchpad she opened first. Draw with me, she said, pressing charcoal into Riley's palm. No rules. Just lines. Riley hesitated, the stick foreign in her grip, but under Evie's patient gaze she began, strokes tentative then bold, etching the fall of water, the arch of branches. Her hand shook at first, muscle memory of triggers overriding, but Evie's touch on her knee grounded her, and soon the page filled with motion, raw and alive. See, Evie whispered, leaning close, her approval a balm. You're still creating. Still whole. The afternoon waned in easy rhythm, but as shadows gathered the cracks widened. A sudden crack of branch underfoot sent Riley bolting upright, heart slamming, eyes scanning for threat. Evie froze, then reached slow, palm open. It's just a deer, Riley. In the brush. The panic ebbed slow, leaving Riley hollowed, sweat beading on her brow. I'm sorry. It pulls me back sometimes. Like I'm still there. Evie gathered her close, rocking gently as the stream rushed on. Then we'll go slow. One breath, one step. Until the now feels safer than the then. That evening, as rain pattered the tin roof, they sat by the fire Evie kindled in the grate, flames licking logs with orange tongues. Stories flowed freer now. Evie's of lonely holidays painting by lamplight, Riley's of squad mates lost to IEDs. Their laughter echoing in empty bunks. Vulnerability hung between them like smoke, acrid but cleansing, and when Evie traced the scar on Riley's cheek with feather-light fingers, Riley didn't pull away. It suits you, Evie said softly. A mark of courage. In the quiet after, with rain drumming a lullaby, Riley felt the first true fracture heal. Not mended seamless but scarred strong, a testament to endurance. The meeting wasn't reunion flawless, but Genesis raw, two souls colliding in the mountain hush, letters unfurling into presence. Dawn broke with a gentleness that belied the storm's remnants, mist veiling the cabin like a bridal shroud, the air crisp with petrichor and renewal. Riley stirred in the hammock's sway, Evie's warmth a counterpoint to the chill, her breath a steady rhythm against Riley's collar. For a moment she lingered in that limbo, half dream half real, before the world asserted itself, birds trilling choruses from the understory. Evie woke with a stretch, smile blooming slow as she brushed a curl from Riley's forehead. Morning looks good on you, she murmured, voice husky with sleep. They broke fast with flapjacks griddled hot, maple syrup tapped from local trees dripping golden, eaten cross-legged on the cabin floor amid scattered cushions. Laughter came easier now, Evie's tales of mischievous students drawing Riley into anecdotes of barracks pranks, the shared mirth a bridge over chasms. But beneath the levity, understanding unfurled tentative tendrils, conversations circling the heart of their parting, the regrets that had festered unspoken. After they wandered the forest paths, boots sinking into mossy earth, Evie's hand a constant in Riley's. The trail led to an overlook where the Blue Ridge folded upon itself in endless undulations, valleys cradling mist like secrets held close. They sat on a boulder smoothed by centuries, legs dangling over the drop, wind whispering through the pines. I need to say it proper, Riley began, voice steady despite the vertigo of exposure. Before I left for basic, I pushed you away. Said it was for us, that distance would make the goodbye easier. But truth? I was scared. Of needing you too much. Of the uniform changing me into someone you wouldn't recognize. Evie nodded, gaze fixed on a distant hawk tracing lazy arcs. I felt it, that wall you built. Bricks of duty, mortar of fear. I wrote anyway because loving you wasn't about holding tight. It was about letting you fly, even if it broke me. Her fingers tightened on Riley's, knuckles whitening. But the silence after your injury, that cut deepest. I thought I'd lost you for good. Riley turned, cupping Evie's face, thumb tracing the bow of her lip. You didn't lose me. I lost myself. The blast took more than skin. It stole the girl who believed in tomorrows without tripwires. Tears welled, hot and unashamed, spilling as she leaned forehead to forehead. Forgive me, Evie. For the quiet when you needed my voice. For coming back a stranger. Evie's breath hitched, a sob swallowed then released in a rush. There's nothing to forgive, Riley. Not when I see you fighting for air every day. She pulled back, eyes fierce with conviction. We're both scarred, me from the waiting, you from the fray. But understanding that. It's the start. The grace. They lingered there until noon, words weaving a tapestry of absolution. Apologies for letters unanswered, for holidays spent solitary, for the love they'd let atrophy in absence. Evie confessed her own fractures, the string of quiet dates that fizzled like damp matches, the canvases abandoned in fits of doubt. I thought I'd forgotten how to feel full, she said, voice threading the wind. Until your envelope arrived, like a key turning in a long-locked door. Riley shared fragments of therapy sessions back home, the VA counselor's office with its fluorescent hum and posters preaching resilience, the exercises in breath that felt like betrayal to the dead. They say name the pain to tame it, she told Evie, tracing patterns in the lichen on the rock. But naming you? That was the ache I ran from longest. Lunch was a picnic by the creek. Sandwiches of smoked trout from the market in town, wrapped in wax paper, eaten with feet dangling in the current. Water rushed cool over ankles, carrying leaves like surrendered flags, and in that flow forgiveness deepened. Evie sketched them there, quick lines capturing Riley's profile against the ripple, the scar a deliberate stroke of emphasis. Beauty in the imperfect, she explained, handing over the page. Like us. Afternoon brought rain again, soft and sustaining, drumming the truck's roof as they drove into Asheville proper. The town unfolded in vibrant layers. Galleries tucked into Victorian facades, street musicians coaxing melodies from banjos, the scent of barbecue mingling with craft brews from brewpubs. Evie led Riley to a small studio off Biltmore Avenue, her workspace a sunlit loft with easels like sentries and walls papered in studies of light on water. "This is where I waited," she said, gesturing to a corner shelf lined with folded letters, Riley's ring resting atop like a crown. They spent hours there, Evie guiding Riley's hand on a fresh canvas, broad sweeps of ochre for the desert sun, blues bleeding into greens for the healing hills. Paint smeared their fingers, laughter rising when Riley's brush flicked accidental stars across Evie's cheek. In the vulnerability of creation, barriers crumbled further. Riley spoke of squad mates whose names she whispered to the stars, Evie of the Vermont winters that mirrored her isolation, snow blanketing the world in white silence. As dusk painted the streets in lavender, they dined at a riverside bistro, candlelight flickering on the French Broad's surface, trout grilled with herbs and lemon wedges bright as hope. Conversation turned intimate, voices low over wine that warmed without blurring. "What if we try again?" Evie ventured, fork pausing midair, eyes searching Riley's. Not as echoes of who we were, but as survivors building something new. Riley's heart stuttered, the proposal a leap akin to rappelling cliffs in training. "I'd like that. More than like. But slow, Evie. Let me learn to trust the ground beneath me." The drive back wound through twilight, fireflies winking like conspirators along the roadside. At the cabin the fire roared welcoming, and they curled on the rug before it, Evie's head in Riley's lap, fingers combing through wheat gold strands. Stories softened to silences, comfortable as worn denim, and when sleep beckoned, they retreated to the loft bed under rafters beamed like protective arms. Dreams visited Riley gentler that night. Evie's smile overlaying the sand, letters transforming to bridges spanning the divide. Understanding bloomed in the dark, a quiet bloom. Forgiveness not as erasure, but as embrace of the flawed whole. The Thursday in its rawest form was the mountain air filling her lungs anew, the creek's song lulling her toward dawn. Days stretched into a week, the cabin a cocoon for their unfolding. Mornings dawned with coffee brewed strong, shared on the porch as deer grazed the meadow below. Afternoons wandered, hikes to hidden waterfalls where mist veiled their kisses tentative, first brushes of lips like rain on parched earth, soft and seeking. Evenings by the hearth, reading aloud from Evie's worn copy of Walt Whitman, voices intertwining like vines. One twilight as they stood on the overlook, arms encircling waists, Evie turned to Riley with eyes alight. "We've understood the pain," she said, breath mingling. "Now let's forgive the time it stole." Riley pulled her close, the valley echoing their vow in whispers of wine through the trees, a promise etched in the ridges, enduring as the ancient stone. The Blue Ridge mornings carried a crisp edge now, autumn's first blush tinting the leaves in golds and crimsons, as if the mountains themselves were shedding skins for rebirth. Riley woke to the scent of Evie in the sheets, lavender and earth a grounding perfume, and for the first time, the stirrings of dawn didn't summon ghosts, only the quiet thrill of presence. She traced the curve of Evie's shoulder, exposed in sleep, marveling at the resilience of this woman who'd held space for her across years and miles. Breakfast became ritual. Eggs scrambled with foraged mushrooms, toast charred just so, eaten at the window nook overlooking the creek's silver thread. Conversation flowed like the water below. Plans tentative, dreams voiced aloud. "I've been thinking of the coast," Riley said one morning, butter knife pausing over jam. "Not forever but visits. Show you the dunes where I learned to breathe again." Evie's smile curved, warm as sunlight on water. And I'll take you to Vermont come winter. Snowshoe through the whites, watch the loons dive at dawn. Their fingers linked across the table, a pact sealed in crumbs and coffee rings. With forgiveness as foundation, rebirth stirred tentative, like seedlings pushing through forest floor. Riley found rhythm in the days. Mornings chopping wood for the hearth, the axe bite a cathartic release, splinters of pine scenting her skin. Afternoons joined Evie in the garden, hands delving into loamy soil, planting bulbs that promise spring, tulips and daffodils, bursts of color against the coming chill. Roots take time, Evie explained, patting earth gentle. But once they grip, nothing uproots them. Riley nodded, wiping dirt from her brow, the labor a metaphor she felt in her bones. Therapy letters from the V arrived, exercises in journaling that once mocked her now invited entries. Gratitudes for the hawk's cry at dusk, the weight of Evie's hand in hers. Vulnerability, once a vulnerability, became vain. Stories of lost comrades shared over trail mix on hikes. Evie's tears honoring the fallen as Riley's had not alone. One crisp afternoon, they drove to a nearby overlook, truck bed laden with a thermos of cider and blankets woven thick. The view stretched endless, peaks layering into haze, and there, under a quilt of crimson leaves, rebirth deepened. Evie unpacked a small box, letters, yes, but also photos. Faded Polaroids from their college days, Riley's grin fierce beside Evie's shy tilt, a soccer ball between them. I kept them, Evie confessed, passing one over. Reminders that we were real, even in the quiet. Riley's throat tightened, thumb smudging the glossy edge. I burned mine before shipping out. Thought it'd free me. She met Evie's gaze, steady now. But seeing this it's like reclaiming pieces I thought gone. They lay back, heads pillowed on folded wool, clouds scudding overhead like thoughts unchained. Evie's hand slipped under Riley's shirt, palm flat against her abdomen. Not seeking more but affirming life, the rise and fall of breath a testament. You're blooming, Riley, she whispered. Layer by layer. Evenings wove intimacy closer. Shared baths in the clawfoot tub, water steaming scented with rosemary from the windowsill, knees drawn up as they talked of futures. Riley spoke of enrolling in community college again. Environmental studies, perhaps, channeling her love of trails into stewardship. Evie dreamed aloud of a joint gallery show. Riley's raw sketches beside her polished oils, a dialogue of survival in strokes. Laughter punctuated the plans, light as falling leaves, when Riley recounted her first awkward attempt at pottery in the studio, clay collapsing in a glorious mess. But rebirth wasn't linear. Shadows lingered, testing the soil. A nightmare gripped Riley one night. Desert heat morphing to mountain cold, Evie's face dissolving into sand, and she woke gasping, sheets twisted like restraints. Evie stirred, drawing her close without question, humming a lullaby from her childhood, Vermont hills in melody. Breathe with me, she urged, hand over heart. In the light, out the dark. Morning brought amends. A walk to the creek, stones skipped across surface, each plunk a release. It'll come in waves, Riley admitted, arm around Evie's waist. But with you I can ride them. The week culminated in a trip to town, Asheville's farmers' market bustling under October sun, stalls heaped with pumpkins and cider, fiddles sawing lively airs. They wandered hand in hand, unhurried, selecting heirloom apples glossy as jewels, cheese veined blue like mountain streams. At a craft booth, Evie bought matching pendants, oak leaves and silver, echoes of the ring, and fastened Riley's with deliberate care, clasp clicking like commitment. Back at the cabin they cooked together. Apple pie from scratch, crust flaky under rolling pin, filling bubbling cinnamon sweet. As it baked, filling the air with autumn's promise, they danced in the kitchen. Slow sway to an old radio crooning Joan Baez. Bodies aligning fluid, scars forgotten in motion. Riley dipped Evie low, eliciting a giggle pure as birdsong, and in that spin she felt it, rebirth not as a rival, but as becoming a continual unfurling. Later, by firelight, pie warm on plates, they read from a shared journal Evie started. Entries of small triumphs, Riley's first unassisted sketch, Evie's painting inspired by Riley's tales. This is us, Evie said, fork gesturing to the page. Not the war, not the wait. The now planting seeds. Riley leaned in, kissing her temple. lips lingering on skin soft as petal. And the harvest? It'll be worth every storm. As leaves turned full fire, their days deepened. Hikes to hidden glades where ferns carpeted the earth like emerald rugs, picnics of bread and brie under canopies ablaze. Riley took up the guitar Evie kept by the bed, chords rusty but earnest, strumming folk tunes that spoke of roads and redemption. Evie watched, eyes soft, occasionally joining harmony, voices blending like rivers to sea. One evening, as frost nipped the air, they built a bonfire in the clearing, flames leaping high, casting faces in golden relief. Marshmallows toasted golden, stories spun of childhoods, Riley's coastal escapades, Evie's snowy forts, and in the crackle Riley voiced a deeper mending. The letters saved me out there. But you're teaching me to thrive. Evie fed a branch to the blaze, sparks ascending like prayers. And you're showing me love isn't fragile. It's the root that holds through winter. Night deepened, stars wheeling overhead, and they lay on blankets, Evie's head on Riley's chest, heartbeat a drum of assurance. Rebirth wrapped them then, not as endpoint, but as path endless ascending, alive with the light of what endured. November crept in on winds that stripped the trees bare, branches skeletal against skies of bruised gray. But the cabin held its warmth, hearth glowing steady as a heartbeat. Riley and Evie had extended the stay, the coast's pull yielding to the mountain's embrace, days stretching into a tapestry of routine laced with revelation. Mornings now included yoga on the porch, Evie leading poses with gentle cues, Riley's body unfolding slow, warrior stance reclaiming strength not for battle, but balance. Feel the earth hold you, Evie would say, hands adjusting hips, touch a language of trust. With rebirth's roots taking hold, light began to pierce the interstices, illuminating paths once shadowed. Riley volunteered at the local VIA outreach in Asheville, sharing her story in group circles under fluorescent hum. Words halting at first, then flowing, met with nods from faces etched similar. The letters, she told them one Tuesday, circle of folding chairs creaking. They were my North Star. Reminded me home wasn't a place but a person. The admission echoed back, camaraderie blooming like crocuses through snow. And Evie waited outside after, thermos of soup in hand, her presence a quiet victory. Afternoons turned creative, joint projects in the studio, canvases side by side, Riley's abstracts of explosion fractals softening into landscapes under Evie's influence. One piece emerged, a swirl of ochre resolving into a sunrise over ridges, titled After the Dust. Evie hung it by the door, a talisman against doubt. Evenings they cooked ambitiously. Stews simmered with venison from a hunter friend, cornbread-studded sage, shared with stories of progress. Riley's acceptance letter to the environmental program, Evie's grant for a community mural project depicting local lore. Light manifested in small illuminations, a cardinal's flash at the feeder, vivid against hoarfrost, the way Evie's laughter peeled back Riley's guarded smiles into genuine grins. They drove to hot springs one weekend, soaking in mineral pools fed by the earth, steam rising like spirits ascending. Water lapped warm, minerals easing knots Riley carried unwitting, and there buoyant they spoke of permanence. Move here, Evie urged, fingers tracing Riley's wrist underwater. Or Vermont. Or split the seasons. Just us together. Riley considered, bubbles popping soft. I've got Mama to think of, the farmhouse. But yeah, a life woven, not separate threads. Winter's approach brought Thanksgiving, the cabin transformed. Table laden with turkey roasted golden, cranberry relish tart, pumpkin pie spice deep. Clara arrived by train, her practical valise in hand, eyes widening at the pair's easy domesticity, hands brushing in passing, glances lingering fond. Over pie stories bridged gaps. Clara's tales of Riley's childhood mischief, Evie's of Vermont feasts with kin. You've got color again, Clara told Riley later, washing dishes side by side, suds foaming, like the sun found its way back in. The holiday wove them tighter, light flickering in shared toasts, to survival, to smiles that taught living. Post-feast walks cleared the air, crunching leaves underfoot, Clara's arm linked with Riley's, Evie's on the other side, a chain unbroken. As snow dusted the peaks they decorated. Strings of dried orange slices and popcorn garlands draped the mantel. A tree felled small from the woodlet, ornaments of glass and wood catching firelight. Riley carved a star for the top, knife steady in her grip, symbol of navigation reclaimed. Evie painted cards for neighbors, scenes of the creek in winter hush, and together they delivered them, trucks skidding light on fresh powder. One starlit night, bundled in coats, they snowshoed to the overlook, thermos of mulled wine steaming. The valley lay blanketed white, moon silvering the silence, and there under endless black pricked diamond, light crested full. Riley pulled a small box from her pocket, the promise ring polished anew, paired with a band of oak inlay. Not a proposal of perfection, she said, kneeling in snow, voice steady as the peaks. But of this, us light after dark. Evie's breath clouded, eyes wide, then spilling joy. Yes, she whispered, drawing Riley up. Kiss sealing vow, soft, profound, tasting of wine in winter. Spring's promise lingered in planning. A wedding small on the beach come summer, sands warm under vows. Riley called her mother daily, voice lighter, sharing sketches of venues, Evie's inputs chiming in. Community deepened, art classes where Riley assisted, her war stories inspiring teen survivors of their own battles, potlucks at the outreach, where Evie served pie, her warmth thawing guarded hearts. Light wove through conflicts minor, a nightmare that sent Riley pacing, Evie rising to brew tea, holding space until dawn. A disagreement over relocation resolved in compromise, a cabin here visits north. Each tested, each strengthened, bonds gilding brighter. Summer bloomed eventual, but in winter's heart they drove east, Riley introducing Evie to the coast. Dunes whispering, waves curling, foam lace. Clara welcomed with hugs fierce, farmhouse alive with chatter. They walked the pier at dusk, letters box unearthed anew. Read aloud under gulls' cries, words bridging past to now. Back in mountains as thaw trickled, light solidified. A gallery opening for their joint show, canvases hung tandem. Desert to ridge, pain to peace. Viewers lingered, moved, one veteran clasping Riley's hand. You made the shadows sing. Nights ended entwined, Evie's breath Riley's lullaby, dreams now of horizons shared. Light wasn't absence of dark, but its companion guiding, warm, eternal. In the cabin's hush as fire popped embers, Riley whispered to Evie's sleeping form. You taught me living. Now we shine together. The wedding dawned under Carolina skies washed clean by overnight rain. The air humming with salt and renewal, dunes sculpted fresh by wind. Wilmington's shore stretched golden, waves lapping rhythmic as a vow unspoken. The old oak, witness to buried letters, standing sentinel nearby, roots deep in sand that no longer sought to swallow. Riley stood barefoot on the pier's edge, toes curling over weathered planks, her simple linen suit tailored crisp, the oak-inlaid band glinting on her finger. At 33 she felt not mended flawless, but forged resilient, scars silvered threads in the fabric of her being. Blue eyes clear as the horizon. Evie approached from the beach path, white sundress flowing like sea foam, hair loose and crowned with wildflowers, seaside goldenrod and dune camellia, petals nodding in the breeze. Her smile broke full, the one that had anchored Riley through barges and blackouts, now radiant in daylight's unsparing gaze. Clara flanked her, arm looped proud, while a small circle gathered. Boatyard mates in button-downs, Asheville artists with sketchpads tucked discreet, their friends bearing quiet strength. No vast throng, just intimates, the gathering intimate as breath shared. The officiant, a local judge with salt-streaked beard and voice like gravel smoothed by tides, began under the oak's dappled shade. We stand where earth meets water, she intoned, words carrying over surf's murmur. Witness to two souls who've navigated storms to find this shore. Vows exchanged simple, etched sincere. Riley's voice steady. Evie, your letters were my light in the dust. Your smile my map home. I promise to walk beside you through ridges and waves, holding space for shadows and sun. Evie's reply, eyes locked. Riley, you survived for us. Now we live for the dawns we build, the nights we hold. My hand in yours, always. Rings slid home, silver oaks entwined, symbols enduring. And the kiss sealed it, salt-tanged and profound, cheers rippling like breakers. The reception unfolded on blankets spread duneward. Crab boils steaming, corn grilled charred, pie from Clara's oven sliced generous. Laughter wove through toasts, Clara's to hearts that find their way. Ave buddies to letters that outlast lead. and dances barefoot in sand, fiddles conjured from a Bluetooth speaker, Evie's head on Riley's shoulder as stars pricked twilight. Honeymoon whispered in the afterglow. A road trip north tracing ridges to Vermont's lakes, cabins booked rustic, trails mapped for two. But first, the farmhouse called. Nights under its roof, Evie meeting the ghosts of Riley's youth, sketching the garden where azaleas bloomed defiant. "This place shaped you," Evie said one evening, porch swing creaking, Clara's pie cooling inside. "Strong roots. I'll tend them with you." Months unfurled in dual homes. Winters in Asheville's hush, springs on the coast's edge, summers split between mountain streams and marsh whispers. Riley enrolled, classes on ecology filling notebooks with sketches of wetlands restored. Her voice in discussion steady, drawing from war's harsh lessons in fragile balance. Evie's mural graced the town square. A cascade of ridges flowing to sea, figures hand-linked bridging divides, unveiled to applause that echoed her healing. Challenges came gentle. Distances tug when separated. A flare of old panic in crowds that Evie soothed with breath and presence. But light prevailed. Anniversaries marked with letters anew, exchanged under oaks or by creeks, words evolving. 1 year of us blooming wild. Community deepened. Riley leading workshops for vets, paints and clay tools in hand. Evie's classes incorporating her tales, art as armor. A pregnancy flickered dream. Not theirs yet, but talked in whispers, adoption papers mulled over cider, futures imagined expansive. One autumn, back in Pisgah, they revisited the cabin, now theirs, deeded by Evie's kin, a ritual of return. Fire crackled, stew simmered, and on the porch under leaves aflame Riley pulled Evie close. "The war took much," she murmured, forehead to forehead. "But you gave more. Survival to thriving, shadows to shine." Evie's smile, that teaching curve, lit the dusk. "We did it together. Light's not solitary, it's shared, endless as these hills." Years layered gentle. A child adopted, dark curls and eyes like Evie's, calling Riley Mama R. Teaching them joy's raw edges. Galleries hosted their work. Books of letters compiled. Anonymous, for others navigating dark, titles like Anchors in Ink. Clara passed soft in sleep. Garden thriving under their care. Her chair on the porch a seat for stories told to little ears. Vermont visits brought snowmen lopsided, loons calling kin. Through it light held. Not blinding but steady glow, sunrise over dunes, mist lifting ridges, smiles exchanged in quiet mornings. Riley once hollowed, now full. Evie once waiting, now woven. In the end or the endless now they sat by the creek, hands aged but laced, watching water carve stone smooth. "Her letters helped me survive the war," Riley would say if asked, voice rich with years. "And her smile taught me how to live after it. Fully, fearlessly loved." The current carried on, light eternal in their reflection.